to the hill country and bring back branches of olive, wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make shelters. Just as it is written, the people went out, brought back branches, and made shelters for themselves on each of their rooftops and courtyards, the court of the horse of God, the house of God. Not the horse of God, the house of God, the square by the water gate, and the square by the Ephraim gate. The whole community that had returned from exile made shelter and lived in them. The Israelites had not celebrated like this from the days of Joshua, son of Nun, until that day, and there was tremendous joy. Ezra read out of the book of the law of God every day, from the first to the last. The Israelites celebrated the festival for 7 days, and on the 8th day, there was a solemn assembly according to the ordinance. On the 24th day of the month, a little bit of a time jump there, the Israelites assembled. They were fasting, wearing sackcloth, and had put dust on their heads. Those of Israelite descent separated themselves from all foreigners, and they stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their ancestors. While they stood in their places, they read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a fourth of the day, and spent another fourth of the day in confession and worship of the Lord their God. All of these Levite names stood on the raised platform built for the Levites and cried out loudly to the Lord their God. Then the Levites, listing them again, said, "Stand up. Blessed be the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, and may it be exalted above all blessing and praise. You, Lord, are the only God. You created the heavens, the highest heavens, with all their stars, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all of them. You and all the stars of heaven worship you. You, the Lord, are the one who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans, and changed his name to Abraham. You found his heart faithful in your sight and made a covenant with him to give him the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Girgashites, to give it to his descendants. You have fulfilled your promise, for you are righteous. You saw the oppression of our ancestors in Egypt and heard their cry at the Red Sea. You performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh, all his officials, and all the people of his land. For you knew how arrogantly they treated our ancestors. You made a name for yourself that endures to this day. You divided the sea before them, and they crossed through it on dry ground. You hurled their pursuers into the depths like a stone into raging water. You led them with a pillar of cloud by day and with a pillar of fire by night to illuminate the way they should go. You came down on Mount Sinai and spoke to them from heaven. You gave them impartial ordinances, reliable instructions, and good statutes and commands. You revealed your holy Sabbath to them and gave them commands, statutes, and instructions through your servant Moses. You provided bread from heaven for their hunger. You brought them water from the rock for their thirst. You told them, "Go in and possess the land you had sworn to give them." But our ancestors acted arrogantly. They became stiff-necked and did not listen to your commands. They refused to listen and did not remember your wonders you performed among them. They became stiff-necked and appointed a leader to return to their slavery in Egypt. But you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in faithful love, and you did not abandon them. Even after they had cast an image of a calf for themselves and said, "This is your God who brought you out of Egypt," and they had committed terrible blasphemies, you did not abandon them in the wilderness because of your great compassion. During the day, the pillar of cloud never turned away from them, guiding them on their journey. During the night, the pillar of fire illuminated the way they should go. You sent your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths, and you gave them water for their thirst. You provided for them in the wilderness 40 years, and they lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. You gave them kingdoms and peoples and established boundaries for them. They took possession of the land of King Sihon of Heshbon and the land of King Og of Bashan. You multiplied their descendants like the stars of the sky and brought them to the land you told their ancestors to go in and possess. So their descendants went in and possessed the land. You subdued the Canaanites who inhabited the land before them and handed their kings and the surrounding peoples over to them to do as they pleased with them. They captured fortified cities and fertile land and took possession of well-supplied houses, cisterns cut out of rock, vineyards, olive groves, and fruit trees in abundance. They ate, were filled, became prosperous, and delighted in your great goodness. But they were disobedient and rebelled against you. They flung your law behind their backs and killed your prophets who warned them in order to turn them back to you. They committed terrible blasphemy, so you handed them over to their enemies who oppressed them. In their time of distress, they cried out to you, and you heard from heaven in your abundant compassion. You gave them deliverers who rescued them from the power of their enemies. But as soon as they had relief, they again did what was evil in your sight, so you abandoned them to the power of their enemies who dominated them. When they cried out to you again, you heard from heaven and rescued them many times in your compassion. You warned them to turn back to your law, but they acted arrogantly and would not obey your commands. They sinned against your ordinances, which a person will live by if he does them. They stubbornly resisted, stiffened their necks, and would not obey. You were patient with them for many years, and your spirit warned them through your prophets, but they would not listen. Therefore, you handed them over to the surrounding peoples. However, in your abundant compassion, you did not destroy them or abandon them, for you are a gracious and compassionate God. So now our God, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God who keeps his gracious covenant, do not view lightly all the hardships that have afflicted us, our kings and leaders, our priests and prophets, our ancestors, and all your people, from the days of the Assyrian kings until today. You are righteous concerning all that has happened to us because you have acted faithfully while we have acted wickedly. Our kings, leaders, priests, and ancestors did not obey your law or listen to your commands and warnings you gave them. When they were in their kingdom with your abundant goodness that you gave them, and in the spacious and fertile land you set before them, they would not serve you or turn from their wicked ways. Here we are today, slaves in the land you gave our ancestors so that they could enjoy its fruits and its goodness. Here we are, slaves in it. Its abundant harvest goes to the kings you have set over us because of our sins. They rule over our bodies and our livestock as they please. We are in great distress. In view of all this, we are making a binding agreement in writing on a sealed document containing the names of our leaders, Levites, and priests. And those whose seals were on the document were, and here we're going to skip over a huge list of names of leaders, Levites, head of the people, and all those who signed. But here are the details of the vow starting in Nehemiah 10 in verse 30. We will not give our daughters in marriage to the surrounding peoples, and will not take their daughters as wives for our sons. When the surrounding peoples bring merchandise or any kind of grain to sell on the Sabbath day, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or a holy day. We will also leave the land uncultivated in the 7th year and will cancel every debt. We will impose the following commands on ourselves: to give 1/8 of an ounce of silver yearly for the service of the house of our God, the bread displayed before the Lord, the daily grain offering, the regular burnt offering, the Sabbath and new moon offering, the appointed festivals, the holy things, the sin offerings to atone for Israel and for all the work of the house of our God. We have cast lots among the priests, Levites, and people for donation of wood by our ancestral families at the appointed times each year. They are to bring the wood to our God's house to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. We will bring the first fruits of our land and of every fruit tree to the Lord's house year by year. We will also bring the firstborn of our sons and our livestock as prescribed by law, and will bring the firstborn of our herds and flocks to the house of our God, to the priests who serve in our God's house. We will bring a loaf from our first batch of dough to the priests at the storerooms of the house of our God. We will also bring the first fruits of our grain offering, of every fruit tree, and of the new wine and fresh oil. A tenth of our land's produce belongs to the Levites, for the Levites are to collect the 1/10 offering in all our agricultural towns. A priest from Aaron's descendants is to accompany the Levites when they collect the tenth, and the Levites are to take a tenth of this offering to the storerooms of the treasury in the house of our God. For the Israelites and the Levites are to bring the contributions of grain, new wine, and fresh oil to the storerooms, where the articles of the sanctuary are kept, and where the priests who minister are, along with the gatekeepers and singers. We will not neglect the house of our God. Then chapter 11, Nehemiah starts a genealogical census, and all of chapter 11 lists out chunks of people who are living in Jerusalem after they cast lots to see who will live in Jerusalem versus the outlying cities, lists off the Levites and the priests. Then most of chapter 12 recovers who came with Zerubbabel all the way back in Ezra chapter 1. So we get like a recap of tying these people back to their ancestors. And now I'm going to pick up in chapter 12, verse 27. We're dedicating the wall here. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sent for the Levites, whoever, and this is the part John was looking forward to, wherever they lived, and brought them to Jerusalem to celebrate the joyous dedication with thanksgiving and singing, accompanied by cymbals, harps, and lyres. The singers gathered from the region around Jerusalem, from the settlements of the Netophathonites, from Beth Gilgal, from the fields of Geba and Asmaveth, for they had built settlements for themselves around Jerusalem. I didn't practice that one that started with an A. After the priests and Levites had purified themselves, they purified the people, the city gates, and the wall. Then I brought the leaders. Now, this is Nehemiah talking in first person. Then I brought the leaders of Judah up on top of the wall, and I appointed two large processions that gave thanks. One went to the right on the wall toward the dung gate. Hoshea and half the leaders of Judah followed, along with a whole list of names, and some of the priest's sons with trumpets, and Zechariah, son of Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, son of Mattaniah, and more sons. At the fountain gate, verse 37, they climbed the steps of the city of David on the ascent of the wall and went above the house of David to the water gate on the east. The second Thanksgiving procession went to the left, and I followed it with half the people along the top of the wall, past the Tower of the Ovens to the broad wall, above the Ephraim gate, and by the old gate, the fish gate, the Tower of Hananel, and the Tower of the 100 to the sheep gate. They stopped at the gate of the guard. The two Thanksgiving processions stood in the house of God. So did I, and half the officials accompanying me, as well as the priests, list of priests. Then the singers sang with Jezrahiah as the leader. On that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced because God had given them great joy. The women and children also celebrated, and Jerusalem's rejoicing was heard far away. Verse 44, on that same day, men were placed in charge of the rooms that house supplies, contributions, first fruits, and tenths. The legally required portions for the priests and Levites were gathered from the village fields because Judah was grateful to the priests and Levites who were serving. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification, along with the singers and gatekeepers, as David and his son Solomon had prescribed. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there were heads of the singers and songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. So in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah, all Israel contributed to the daily portions for the singers and the gatekeepers. They also set aside daily portions for the Levites And the Levites set aside daily portions for Aaron's descendants. That would be such a delightful end to the book. There's one more chapter. Chapter 13. At that time, the book of Moses was read publicly to the people. The command was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the Israelites with food and water. Instead, they hired Balaam against them to curse them, but our God turned the curse into a blessing. When the people heard the law, they separated all those of mixed descent from Israel. Now, before this, the priest Eliashib had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. He was a relative of Tobiah. Remember Tobiah from the first part of the book, one of the people who was kind of opposing the whole wall project? That Tobiah? He was a relative of Tobiah and had prepared a large room for him where they had previously stored the grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, and the tenth of grain, new wine, and fresh oil prescribed for the Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, along with the contribution for the priests. While all this was happening, I was not, that's Nehemiah talking again, I was not in Jerusalem, because I had returned to King Artaxerxes of Babylon in the 32nd year of his reign. So he'd been in Jerusalem about 12 years. It was only later that I asked the king for a leave of absence so I could return to Jerusalem. Then I discovered the evil that Eliashib had done on behalf of Tobiah by providing him a room in the courts of God's house. I was greatly displeased and threw all of Tobiah's household possessions out of the room. I ordered that the rooms be purified, and I had the articles of the house of God restored there, along with the grain offering and frankincense. I also found out that because the portions for the Levites had not been given, each of the Levites and the singers performing the service had gone back to their own fields. Therefore, I rebuked the officials, asking, why has the house of God been neglected? I gathered the Levites and singers together and stationed them at their posts. Then all Judah brought a tenth of grain, new wine, and fresh oil into the storehouses. I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse the priest Shelemiah, the scribe Zadok, and Pedaiah of the Levites, with Hanan, son of Zaccur, son of Mattaniah, to assist them, because they were considered trustworthy. They were responsible for the distribution to their colleagues. Remember me for this, my God, and don't erase the deeds of faithful love I have done for the house of my God and for its services. And at that time I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath. They were also bringing stores of grain and loading them on donkeys, along with wine, grapes, and figs. All kinds of goods were being brought to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I warned them against selling food on that day. The Tyrians living there were importing fish and all kinds of merchandise and selling them on the Sabbath to the people of Judah in Jerusalem. I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this evil you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Didn't your ancestors do the same, so that our God brought all this disaster on us and on the city? And now you are rekindling his anger against Israel by profaning the Sabbath? When the shadow began to fall on the city gates of Jerusalem just before the Sabbath, I gave orders that the city gates be closed and not opened until after the Sabbath. I posted some of my men at the gate so that no goods could enter during the Sabbath day. Once or twice the merchants and all those who sell all kinds of goods camped outside Jerusalem. But I warned them, why are you camping in front of the wall? If you do it again, I'll use force against you. After that, they did not come again on the Sabbath. Then I instructed the Levites to purify themselves and guard the city gates in order to keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember me for this also, my God, and look on me with compassion according to the abundance of your faithful love. In those days I also saw Jews who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod or the language of one of the other peoples, but could not speak Hebrew. I rebuked them, cursed them, beat some of their men, pulled out their hair. I forced them to take an oath before God and said, you must not give your daughters in marriage to their sons or take their daughters as wives for your sons or yourselves. Didn't King Solomon of Israel sin in matters like this? There was not a king like him among many nations. He was loved by God, and God made him king over all Israel. Yet foreign women drew him into sin. Why then should we hear about you doing all this terrible evil and acting unfaithfully against our God by marrying foreign women? Even one of the sons of Jehoiada, son of the high priest Eliashib, had become a son-in-law to Sanballat, the Horonite, remember, one of the other opponents of the wall. So I drove him away from me. Remember them, my God, for defiling the priesthood as well as the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. So I purified them from everything foreign and anything, and assigned specific duties to each of the priests and Levites. I also arranged for the donation of wood at the appointed times and their first fruits. Remember me, my God, with favor. And that's how Nehemiah ends. And this is the last bit of history we have in our Bibles about the kingdom of Israel, or now kind of the province of Israel. And now we have a big chunk period of silence here, outside of some Jewish books of Apocrypha, until we get to the days of Jesus. Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm. You know, that's interesting because I don't think there is actually a passage where he consults with God. He does something and then says, remember my faithfulness after he does it. But this is another one of those places like Esther, like some places in Ezra where people are driven to do some good things, the right things. But God as a character, as an actor, as an interventionist, is sending prophets that we have contemporary to this time, but isn't actually speaking to these individuals that we have recorded the way we have it recorded with like Moses and Joshua or even Jonah. Yeah, that is interesting. The Levites. Yeah, so the Levites, this was really cool. So like, first of all, like, I don't know about you, but I had this picture wrong in my head, right? Ezra gets up to read the book of the law and reads the entire Torah without stopping, and the people stand up for the whole time. And that's not what happened here. He reads off and on for several days. He doesn't get through the Torah all at once. It just took us 30 minutes to read this chunk of Nehemiah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are way longer than that. He doesn't get through it all at once. But in the meantime, John's right. We've got these Levites, and what are they doing? They're expounding on the law. They're sharing the oral tradition, but they're doing another thing too. They're translating. They're translating. Because what with the diaspora and then everyone coming back, dialects will have shifted. Linguistic influences will have happened. Some of them may not be speaking Hebrew at all anymore. And the Levites are helping along. They're helping everyone understand what's going on. I think that's a really cool detail in there. So thank you. What else did you all want to talk about in here? Can I talk about, go ahead, Jordan. You go first. You go first. You before me. Mm-hmm.
Getting to the end of his days, he's telling the people of Israel, you won't be able to serve God. And they all like make that promise
Mm-hmm.
before God. And they do during his lifetime. And then they fall away and they get to that same passage.
Yeah.
And we kind of have a parallel passage here where we come back to the promised land, making that promise again. But we see the same issues popping up. Well, maybe not all the same issues, but the same character. They've made a promise, but they're not able in and of themselves to stay true to that.
Yeah, that's a good parallel, Jordan. So, yeah, he's reminding us at the end of Joshua and then into the beginning of the book of Judges. Joshua challenges the people to make an oath to be faithful to God. And they declare multiple times, we will be faithful. Then Judges reveals that all through the days of Joshua and the generation to follow him, the people remained faithful. But then that third generation later, things start to fall apart. Here in Nehemiah, after they get the feast observed and they get everything put back together and they've reread the law and they've made prayer and intercession. Wasn't that incredible prayer in there? They've made intercession not only for themselves but confessing the sins of their ancestors. We then see Nehemiah lead the people in this new pledge. And they treat it like a contract even. Leaders, rulers, Levites, priests. Remember, all priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. Okay, just to make that clear there, because there was a line that threw me for a half second here. It was like they reserved a tenth for the Levites, and then the Levites reserved a tenth for the sons of Aaron. I'm like, wait, what? Oh yeah, that's right, because the tribe of Levi is bigger than the family of Aaron. Confused me for about 10 minutes. But they make this covenant again. But then Nehemiah goes away for an indeterminate amount of time. We don't know how long. Comes back and sees that they're already breaking that new promise, that new contract, that new covenant. So yeah, thank you. Now, it's so cool here that this is all happening in what's called the 7th month. The 7th month, of day 1, opens with the Feast of Trumpets. Okay? Nowadays, it's called Rosh Hashanah, and it's considered the Jewish New Year. And if you want to go research on your own about how the Jewish New Year shifted into the 7th month over time, and they still call it the 7th month, please feel free to go research that. It's very fascinating. But we start with Rosh Hashanah. And then there comes after that now what's called the 10 days of repentance. That's a period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, that the people focus on prayer and calling for forgiveness of past sins. All right, it's a time of meditation. It's a time of being with God. And it may have already been a practice by this time. Were they observing it right here, right now? Probably not. But during this time period is about when it looks like it may have started to emerge, maybe a few generations earlier in the days of Isaiah. Then comes Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And immediately after the Day of Atonement is Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's what they start observing there. So just like Ezra, in the beginning of Ezra with Zerubbabel and them starting to build the temple, and they have feast days to the Lord. And it turns out that it's a month that's full of these important feast days to God. We have this cool parallel here now in Nehemiah, where Nehemiah is also doing a restoration a generation later. And we're landing on another month of cool festivals for the Jewish people. And they start to reestablish one of them right here and make a really big deal out of it. What else did you all notice in here? Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, that was back on Sunday in the chapters previous to this. But yes, during that period of, and I don't know how much you all got a chance to talk about it, but during part of Nehemiah's reforms was that the rich were starting to exploit the poor, just like Amos had condemned, just like Micah had condemned, just like Isaiah had condemned, just like Jeremiah had condemned. And Nehemiah isn't going to have any of it, and he fixes that, and he turns it around for a time. But we've also, oh, go ahead, Jordan. Nope, go for it.
I just think it's an interesting detail. When Ezra's reading the law,
Mm-hmm.
it says in verse 10 of chapter 8, I know, verse 9 of chapter 8, these days holy to the Lord your God, do not mourn, for all the people with because they heard the words of the law. And you kind of expect people to be pleased at emotional reaction to hearing the law.
Mm-hmm.
But he's showing here that he, and by extension, I think they're concerned God. They don't want the people to be overwhelmed by this grief. He's bringing them back. He still loves them, and he wants them to have that
Yeah.
happiness in being back in his presence, his protection.
Yeah, so as Jordan was just pointing out, as the people start to realize how far they had fallen, and they hear the words of God read by Ezra from the words of Moses, and they begin to openly weep at what they're hearing. Nehemiah, Ezra, and the Levites comfort them. This is something that's joyful. This is God's protection over you. This is a day of rejoicing because we're back with God. And yes, so they turn their mourning into joy at the end of that. And that's what then leads into the Feast of Booths starting on the next day. Yeah, great. Good observation there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's reconnecting them to God, and it's reconnecting them to who they are. It's reconnecting them to their roots. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched any of those like genealogy shows or something where like someone sits down and they find out like their family story, like through the generations. They have these like roots now that they didn't know they have, and they become overwhelmed with emotion at it over these people that they've never met. But it's not the people, it's the connection. It's that this is who I am. So this whole thing with the book of God's law, it's kind of this twofold revelation. One, it's the revelation of this is what God wants of us. This is what has severed our relationship with God and how he wants us to come back to him. And additionally, it's a cultural identity. This is who we are. This is how we're set apart. These are our roots. So you can see how that can become a very, very emotional thing. Well, I want to talk about the prayer for a second, and then we're going to talk about the epilogue. So the prayer here in chapter 9, it's a long prayer. I debated whether or not I was going to read the whole thing, and it was just, you can't leave any of this out. Like, they go through the Levites who are leading this psalm-like prayer with the people. They go through the entire history of God's people here, from the choosing of Abram all the way up to returning from exile. They go through Egypt and the Exodus. They go through the period of Judges. They talk about the prophets, and we get to exile. But it's interesting what they emphasize over and over and over again here. You fulfilled your promises. You are righteous. You are righteous. You saw their arrogance, right? But you delivered. You gave them ordinances. Our ancestors acted arrogantly. But you are forgiving, gracious, and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in faithful love. Quoting from God's own introduction to Moses all the way back in Exodus. And they go again and again to the we fell away, our ancestors fell away, our fathers failed you, but you forgave, you preserved, you saved, you delivered. Time and again, they come back to God's mercy and grace on them. And that's what they're holding on to. And now they're saying, we are in the sorry state in this land now. We're beset. We're still servants to a higher power. We come to you for your mercy and your grace. And they end this prayer just simply with, we are in great distress. I mean, it's such an honest and sincere and heartfelt prayer. Again, this is something you could yank out of Nehemiah here. You could stick it in the book of Psalms, and it would feel right at home there, wouldn't it? It's like this just belongs there. And it really challenged me in my own prayer life and how I view prayer. And how do we view the idea of collective repentance or even historical repentance? These guys don't lionize their past. They aren't like, oh, Christopher Columbus was the greatest guy on earth and he's totally flawless. They're like, our ancestors, our forefathers, the people who came before us, they messed up. We recognize the sin and the ugliness and the viciousness and our rejection of you in our history. And we're okay with admitting that. We've got this thing today in our culture where we don't ever want to look backwards. We say things like, well, it's not my fault. It happened 100 years ago. Well, none of this was their fault. When Isaiah lists off the numerous ways God's people had rejected God in the past before getting to where they are now, none of that stuff was their fault. But it's not about fault. It's about recognizing where we've come from and being determined not to do it again. And we can't do that unless we're honest with ourselves. And then they aren't just doing forgive only me. It's forgive us, the congregation, the whole. Was every person there guilty of the exact same sins? No. Just like every person here isn't guilty of the exact same sins. But again, it's not about blame. It's about collective responsibility, knowing that we have all fallen short of God. Go ahead, Jordan, and then we're going to wrap. We won't make it to the epilogue.
But a lot of bad feelings and history with people like in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, there are people today who may have those kinds of feelings. We didn't do it, but a Christian going there may have trouble with that.
Yeah.
And it's not that we need to be about, oh, I didn't do that, so I have no responsibility there. Are we going to see that person as God sees them? Are we going to love them and reach out even though there is this barrier that's been built up? So we may have to work at it, even though we're not the ones who created it.
Yeah, so Jordan, I know we got the second bell there. Jordan was just talking about how, like, wrongdoings of the past, even long ago ones, can have build-up effects and consequences over time and create walls and create barriers. And the question is, what are we going to do with those? Are we going to disregard them, or are we going to see a way to heal? These people looked for a way to heal. They wanted to heal. It didn't stick in the end, but in this moment, man, they were in the right place. They wanted to heal. All right, we're going to be with one more lesson on Sunday, and that's it for this quarter. This is my last class with you. I've really enjoyed working with you these last 6 months, and I hope you've gotten something out of it, and I hope you all have a safe drive home tonight.